let's look at the Egyptian stock market. First off, read this disclaimer carefully. Then do your good deed of the day by liking and subscribing. So Egypt, it's in Africa, 15% here from the 52-week low and 16% away from the highs. This is the chart, weekly data points. And we can go all the way back here to 2010. There's been these major time cycles within which we have tended to see some smaller time cycles, a 1 and a 2, 1, 2, 1. So we are part of like the rising phase is ending midsummer, basically. When we zoom in a bit here, you do see a pattern that looks a bit head and shoulder-ish, but this is a weird head and shoulders because this happens at a low level. So the dynamics of the head and shoulders, it's not the same when it is at a low level. What is especially interesting now is the Green 50-day moving average. It's been reliable so far. So basically, it's very tradable. It's a nice. I think this is a bullish opportunity with a pretty clear stop loss level. Yeah, when we look at these other indicators, RSI and the PPO, it looks pretty neutral on the weeklies, on the dailies. Yeah, we see that it's cooled down. RSI is a bit messy here, as you can see. It's not as tradable. There's a bit of a tendency, though, for a low to be formed further down, but overall, this is messy RSI. And we do have the green 50-day moving average, which is sort of like the number one indicator at the moment, at least in play. And that is a key thing to consider whenever you are considering a trade is, what is currently in play. Because like you can't trade oversold RSI now on Egypt, but the 50-day is in action, so that is like the go-to signal. And I do think I will give the bulls a 6 on this one. It's a pretty interesting. It's not a screaming buy, but it is very buyable. Next, we will look at the seasonality. So in red is the average over the last 10 years, blue last 7 years, and green the last 5 years. Over the last 5 years, we do tend to see weakness into late June, but over the last 10 and 7 years, there is some strength into early June, very early June, like 6th of June. That is when the party sort of ends. Looking at the table view, May so far is 7% loss. And that's a pretty bad May. It's not the worst May, but it's up there on the list. So you could argue, from a more contrarian perspective, that a lot of the bad news might be priced into Egypt at this point. June, except for 2022, it's been a green month. So June is pretty interesting. So the timing here for bullish trades in Egypt, pretty interesting. So let's go back here to my notes. On the seasonality, I do think I will give the bulls. I think this merits a bit of a 5. It's mixed, but it's more bullish than bearish. Let's compare the Africa index with Egypt. So you can see here when we go to performance year to date, Egypt is outperforming Africa substantially. Beta is actually even lower, so that's interesting. 7.4 versus almost 9 for Africa more broadly. 3.9% yield for Africa, 1.4%. Well, 1.5 for Egypt, so much better yield though in the Africa ETF. Here are the holdings. Yeah, so finance is actually the biggest in both, so that's interesting. But yeah, you do see that there's more even distribution here between the sectors in Egypt. So comparing, if we were to compare Egypt with, the S&P 500, there's definitively more value in Egypt. And even when we're comparing Egypt here with Africa, there's value. So yeah, I think that from a fundamental perspective, I would have to give it a 7. I mean, there's definitively value here in Egypt, and you also have some other reasons to be bullish. Okay, so these are the long-term correlations here for Egypt. We do have 15% against S&P 500, which is rather modest. 77% with AFK, the Africa ETF, and minus 89% with the dollar index. So stronger with the dollar, but negative. Dailies, 5% with S&P, 46% with Africa, positive, minus 21% with the dollar index. So seems like AFK wins out as being like the number one indicator for those who want to trade. Well, have some additional data about trading Egypt. So this looks like a weak triple bottom, 1, 2, and 3. I would call it a weak triple bottom because the last week here is more bearish than you want to see at a triple bottom. You ideally want to see more bullish action than this. But the bears are stopping. They're selling here, you see, into the close of the week. So it's a bit interesting, but yeah, I don't like, especially this candlestick here on the 18th of May on the Thursday. Not ideal. But yeah, overall it's sort of interesting from a bullish perspective. Looking at the seasonality for Africa, at least over the last 10 years, it's a bit bullish. Not terrible over the last 5 or 7, but yeah. May, almost 6% loss so far, so one of the worst Mays. June, though, is not bullish. So Africa, a bit more messy than what we saw with Egypt. But then again, it is Egypt that we are intending here to trade, or not, AFK. Let me just double check. I typed a bit quickly here because there's a lot of things that could have the AFK ticker. Yes, this is correct. So Egypt, it has outperformed AFK substantially. Well, not that substantially, but meaningfully. We do see, though, on RSIs that we are in a territory that could turn to a reversal in Egypt's disfavor, but still, it's not like very high RSI. Now, looking here at the price itself, could be a bit of a breakout in development. We are challenging these previous highs, and you also see that we have some higher lows. So initially, that's a sign that there could be some good times ahead. We do see that we got rather overbought, though, on the RSI, a bit of a pullback in development. There's a bit of a tendency, though, after pullbacks to explore some of the lower regions. But as you can see here, and also here, you could also spend quite some time re-challenging these levels. Yes, let's look at the seasonality. The seasonality is actually in Egypt's favor, which is bullish. May been weak so far. The last 2 years, June was bullish, but it's not like overall that bullish month. So all in all, I do think that the situation was a bit bullish here on relative performance, but I will give the bulls a 3. We end up with 5.3 in favor of Egypt. We are at 50 daily moving average support. I think there's more reasons here to be bullish than bearish, but ideally I would like to see more strength here from the bulls, but we get what we get. Okay, so we have some time left. Let's look at the boost list. So these are securities for which there are leveraged ETFs, bullish and bearish. So they are very tradable. So when we look at Apple here, we're not talking about necessarily trading Apple, but there are direction ETFs that allow you to go bullish or bearish Apple. So a bit of a breakout in development here for Apple, a strong move. But then again, this is very large cap, 2.7 trillion US dollars. Will it double from here? I really doubt that. Yeah, something that is, though, very interesting from Apple is the chatter about a virtual reality headset. Talk about a breakthrough in that tech. There's been a lot of attempts, though, to really make a good VR headset, and so far we haven't really seen it. The PlayStation 5 has something pretty interesting now, but still, it's not really where we want it to be. And it's to be, continued here with Apple. It's going to be very interesting what they release. Well, what they plan to release. But that could propel the stock if it is really good. But, we have seen so many attempts. I mean, Meta, they tried and not really been a smash success yet. But yeah, I think that Apple, it's a bit difficult because there's this unknown here. But let's actually start with the bottom of the list here. Let's start with silver. So the BITO is the Bitcoin. Okay, let's just do Bitcoin just to be fair, like that. So the red 200-week moving average, really the number one level to watch. The bulls are protecting it. I do like that. On the dailies, 100-day moving average in blue, another technical level. Seasonality is not like really bullish, but it's not like bearish either. It's just a bit of a shuffle sideways with a bit of a bullish bias into early June. Looking at the table view, though, we see that 2022 was definitively not a good June. So far, May has been weak. July is more generally bullish. So yeah, seasonality is a bit messy. So yeah, we looked at Egypt and then we ventured a bit into Apple and Bitcoin. So overall, I do think that Egypt is pretty interesting at these levels. A bit of a bullish trade with a clear stop loss level at the 50 daily moving average support. Apple could become interesting if they have something really good. When it comes to Bitcoin, it looks pretty interesting. I mean, the bulls have, of course, had some screw ups in the past, so there's a very good reason to have some stop loss below these support levels. But the bulls are doing something here that I really like. There's been a lot of talk about the next big bull cycle in Bitcoin and other cryptos. We haven't really seen it yet, but when the point where you do see it in the chart, that is when it is way too late to get into it, at least in a meaningful way. So that's just the paradox of being in the market. Whatever you do, of course, you do want to go to diamondarm.com and get more intel, and have a great week ahead.